Hello, mate.
Bloody James O'Brien, you're here.
Right,
You've got your water.
Perfect.
In a can. So I'm only with James O'Brien, LBC superstar, hero of the Remain movement, Remainia.
Might not be a thing soon.
Well, I was going to ask, Brexit, do you have any opinions on Brexit?
Not really, no. I just wait and see how things pan out. But one thing that is odd, for me personally, is that it's been astonishingly good for my professional life. And yet, at the same time, my soul is shrivelling daily at the prospect of what is going to happen to the country. So I do have...
So if there was a graph, there's an inverse correlation between your career and country going to pot.
Yeah, there is. I think there is.
If no deal Brexit is really what you wanted all along, why are your heroes now desperately trying to blame it on the European Union?
I still find, and again, it's very hard to talk about it without sounding immodest, but I still don't really understand why I've ended up being a rallying point for positions that really are just logical and relatively straightforward. That is part of the malaise, isn't it? Actually, when historians of the future try to pinpoint problems, the fact that Remain never really had a focus while Leave had 3 or 4 is going to be part of the answer to that question, I think.
Why is it, do you think, you've become this big figurehead for the Remain movement?
Yeah, simply because I'd asked people to explain their position. And astonishingly, and I still say this with a sense of incredulity, nobody else was. Not the what. I know what you think, tell me why you think it. And it's missing, I would argue, from the highest echelons of journalism right down to the vox pops.
We were on the losing side in the referendum. Why? Why did it go so wrong for Remain in the actual referendum? What did they do wrong?
Trying to fight emotions with facts was the early problem, and then they tried to fight emotions with emotions and they got their emotions wrong, so they were susceptible to the whole Project Fear thing. You had several contradictory leaves. You had several positions that were irreconcilable to each other, and yet in the context of a binary referendum were on the same side of the argument. So, the obvious EEA, EFTA, Norway, Switzerland leave is utterly irreconcilable with what some of the sort of Faragist headbangers might want, and yet they all coalesced on the same ground and became all part of the same campaign. So that's a big part of why Remain lost. The other part was they just weren't ready for a fight. This idea that a forecast that turned out not to come true is comparable to a barefaced lie is again part of the reason why Remain lost.
I want to work out for you what really, really grinds your goat about Brexit most. Is it identity, an affront on values, or is it about economic consequences?
It's not. It's somehow these people who claimed to be anti-establishment and claimed almost to be anti-authority, like your Johnsons and your Farages, they actually adopted the tactics of the establishment and spooked people into somehow thinking that they were voting against the establishment that they represent. Paying Boris Johnson £250,000 a year to convince a car worker in Sunderland to cast a vote that will probably see him lose his job, while claiming that it's anti-establishment, anti-elite. I still don't really fully understand how that ever happened. The Sun described me as a champagne socialist public schoolboy, sneering, condescending Ramona. They treat their readers as if they're as thick as pig shit. I treat them as if they're not.
Do you think part of the problem with Remain, both during the referendum and after, is it came across as very establishment and corporate when people are angry with the status quo? Yeah.
So 6 years of austerity, effectively. And if that hadn't happened, Remain would have got over the line. The idea that people's unhappiness with their lot propelled Brexit is inarguable, but the idea that their lot, the paucity of their lot was attributable to EU membership was bonkers, absolutely insane. Again, I think it's like a failure to grasp the depths to which the other side would go. So, you've got an international financial crisis, global financial crisis in 2008, concomitant refugee crisis. And so when that Breaking Point poster appeared, shortly before Joe Cox was assassinated, you knew that people were being groomed to blame things that they didn't like about their own life on completely the wrong targets, and it worked. It's always worked, though. It's not unique to Brexit, is it?
Do you think sometimes there's been a danger that the most passionate kind of pro-EU, pro-Remain, on Twitter there's a hashtag FBPE, follow back pro-Europe, that they've kind of dominated a lot of the movement, and a lot of people on the Leave side who need to be won over look at them in the same way we look at...
Yeah, I mean, there's a sort of intractability about it. But I used to get, 10 years ago, the messages and the callers talking about the EU SSR and the Fourth Reich. And you see, you're still laughing now.
I remember it well.
But that's what it all boils down to, this concept of enmity. So, you know, they have been persuaded that this institution, this organisation, this union, is dedicated to harming the United Kingdom. They have been fully persuaded of that. Now, you need that in a population if you're ever going to go to war. You need to be able to push relatively simplistic buttons to get people in a state of high emotional dudgeon. Otherwise, you'd never, ever win a war. And so I knew 10 years ago that the stuff that everyone laughs at Marc Francois for coming out with was there. I just had no idea how deep it went and how widespread it was.
Do you think what mistakes have been made in trying to stop Brexit? Because we've had 3.5 years, it's been great fun for all involved, but it's definitely not being stopped.
And yet everyone on the other side would argue that it has been. Historically, the problem was not challenging the fibs about the European Union. It suited successive governments, including Tony Blair's government, to allow the media to continue scapegoating the EU, because the alternative would be to demand that domestic governments solve these problems. You say, country's full of immigrants, it's because we're members of the EU. And no Labour politician really stood up and said, no, look, we miscalculated on the accession states. I can see why that has caused you problems. It doesn't make you racist to be uncomfortable about the speed of demographic change in your community, but this is why it's a good thing. I'll tell you what emerged really quickly, and this goes right back to your first question about why we only got our act together after the referendum result had come in. When people were ringing me from foreign people, Europeans or otherwise, but mostly Europeans, post-referendum, all of their colleagues, even their in-laws, would say, we didn't mean you. So what, you voted Leave, why? Immigration. Oh, well I'm in it. Oh no, we didn't mean you. Well, who did you mean? And they never actually meant real people. They only ever meant Paul Dacre's fevered imaginings about hordes and unchecked masses. And I've had calls off women whose mothers-in-law have said that to them. Over Christmas Day, we didn't mean you. He said, well, you did mean us, and you meant your own grandchildren, because we're all potentially, I can't move back and we can't, I didn't mean you. And that's a failure of journalism, or I suppose, depending on your perspective, a success of journalism.
Well, when you see Farage in the LBC hallways...
It's only happened once.
Oh, what was it like? What happened?
I think I sort of both pretended not really to see each other. There's no... There's no.
Just go to your happy place.
Well, I've done an interview with him. I did an interview with him in the studio.
My argument, James, is this. Wherever we have found people who have had extreme, racist, unpleasant views, we've unceremoniously got rid of them. Furthermore, I've tried to protect the party by making absolutely clear that anybody that had previously been a member of the BNP or organisations like that cannot even join as a member.
I prefer to do most of my talking there, so I don't know what the seating plan is for the Christmas party, but I don't suspect we'll be sat next to each other over the sprouts.
I mean, you've not been, obviously, Corbyn's biggest fan, which is your, obviously, perfectly entitled to...
I would have been. I was winnable. I really was.
What really let you down?
Wouldn't talk to anyone.
Where is it? Where is it? Go on his show.
And I don't think it's even up to him. He pulled out of a Newsnight interview when Seamus was told it was me that was going to be doing it. And if you think about the shit I take for being a lefty, the fact that from some really toxic people, you know, we get the full gamut of it here. The idea that the Labour leader wouldn't talk to me while I'm getting death threats off people who think I'm a Marxist, that is personal on one level, but I'd have been happy to watch him being really held to account over 45 minutes by somebody objective and sceptical, rather than, no offence, simply seeing him on stages with people who are already on side.
But can I ask you though, because even though you've not been, I mean, also you're thinking, come on, he's sort of slighted me by not coming on my show.
No, I want to get this in first because it sounds too self-referential. That subsequently, the anti-Semitism has been a huge issue for me. Subsequently, having watched it unfold and seen the failure properly to deal with it.
Yeah, Labour definitely needs to have done more.
Electorally, it's sadly not a huge problem, but for me, morally, it is.
Yeah, but what I was going to ask you is, in this election, the only way that there's going to be another referendum is if Labour can form a government, because their policy is another referendum.
Yeah.
I mean, it might not be a majority. I mean, obviously, they'd have to turn around huge odds at the moment because the Tories have a lead, big lead.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do? Because this is your big issue, Brexit, and you can stop it now.
Well, it's not a trick question. I will vote in whatever way makes stopping Brexit most likely. If I have to hold my nose, that will be helped immeasurably by the fact that I know my Labour candidate personally. As things stand, I didn't vote for them in the Europeans because it didn't increase the chances of calling Brexit off. I can't spend 3.5 years slagging people off for being binary and blind and then not vote in a nuanced way when I get the chance.
If Brexit does happen, how will you, that moment when the clock ticks to, I think it's going to be 11 p.m. on whichever day, how will you feel? And then what next for you? Because this has propelled you into, you know, you were already a superstar, but superstardom.
No, well, kind of. I'd happily surrender 250,000 listeners to go back to where we were in 2015. Whatever happens, I think on a personal level, I'll be fine. I hope that the people I worry about, who were encouraged to vote to be poorer, to lose their own jobs, I hope I'm wrong about that. But in the context, on an entirely selfish level, there'll be a little bit of relief. I'd like to go back to talking about other things. I just wish it wasn't so important, and I wish the signs weren't so bad. You see Amber Rudd saying, well, yes, of course, the economy is probably going to take a 5 to 6% hit under this arrangement, but I will still vote for it. And I can't, even after all these months, I still can't get my head around that.
James, what a pleasure.
Mate,
I don't always agree with James, but he's a really thoughtful, engaging bloke, and I want to hear your thoughts. How can Remain learn from its past mistakes? And I also want to hear your thoughts about who else we should be interviewing. So leave them in the comments, along with whatever else you want to throw there. As ever, subscribe. I'll see you next time.